My name is Mary, and I was only 16 when I had a harrowing encounter with a man named Ed that I would never forget. It was a chilling November evening, and I had been out late with my friends, celebrating a birthday at Carmel's, a Mexican restaurant in Kettering. As I drove home alone to Hillsborough on a country road, I felt a strange unease settle over me. I glanced at my gas gauge and my heart sank as it hovered dangerously close to empty. I scolded myself for not stopping at the last gas station I had passed, but I had been in a hurry to get home. Now my decision was coming back to haunt me. The road stretched on, seemingly endless, and the surrounding woods were so thick that they seemed to swallow the feeble light of my headlights. My phone buzzed with a message from my dad asking when I would be home. I glanced at the screen and replied with a casual, "Almost there." I didn't want to worry him, and I hoped that I would find a gas station or a helpful stranger not far ahead. But the next 2 miles revealed nothing but more darkness. I had no choice but to pull over to the side of the road as the empty light flashed on the dash. Panic gripped me on the road's edge, with the engine dead and the radio still playing. The car felt confining, and the darkness outside seemed to press in on me as I rolled down the window. And to make matters worse, my cell phone battery died. Sitting there, I saw headlights approaching from behind in my rearview mirror. Both relief and fear swept over me as a car pulled up behind mine. I could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. He got out and walked towards my driver's side. He introduced himself as Ed, a puffy-faced man in his 40s. His eyes were small behind thick glasses, giving him a squinty look through invisible eyes. He offered me a ride to the nearest gas station, which he claimed was only a few miles away. Desperation clouded my judgment, and I agreed. I just wanted to get out of this dark, isolated place. As I climbed into Ed's car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The car smelled musty of old clothes, and the interior was cluttered with empty fast food containers and newspapers. My phone was dead, and my gut told me I had made a grave mistake. As we drove deeper into the darkness, Ed's behavior grew increasingly unsettling. He began to ask intrusive questions, probing into my personal life and my family's finances. Fear crept over me as I realized that Ed had ulterior motives. Suddenly, Ed pulled off the road onto a secluded path leading into the woods. Panic welled up inside me as he revealed his true intentions. With a wicked grin, he told me he needed money and believed my family was wealthy. He said he knew the area I said I was from, and he knew my parents had to have money. I knew I had to act fast to save myself. With trembling hands, I began to weave a web of lies, telling Ed that my family had a fortune hidden away, but I was the only one who knew where it was. I spun a tale of hidden cash in a secret attic room of our house, hoping to distract him and buy myself some time. Ed's greed got the best of him and demanded I take him to this supposed hidden attic room. I agreed, telling him we needed to turn around to return to the main road and go north. He stopped the car to turn around on the forest path, and I dove out of the car and ran into the woods. I sprinted away from him, crashing through the underbrush, and I didn't look back. I could hear his enraged shouts behind me, but I didn't stop until I reached a nearby farm, where I hammered on the door screaming for help. A farmer and his wife came to the door and, seeing my distress, brought me inside and locked the door. The kind farmer called my dad, and he came and picked me up and took me home. We retrieved my car with a can of gas the next day. I was lucky to escape with my life the night before, having outwitted Ed with my desperate ruse of our family's hidden cash. I learned a terrifying lesson about the dangers of trusting strangers and the importance of listening to my instincts. I would forever be haunted by the memory of that dark, treacherous night and the man named Ed who had attempted to rob me and my family. In the fall of 2021, my girlfriend, Sally Ann, and I embarked on a road trip to explore the beautiful mountains of Tennessee. We were both excited to escape the hustle and bustle of our daily lives and immerse ourselves in the serene wilderness. Little did we know that our adventure would take an unexpected and terrifying turn. The day had been filled with picturesque vistas and winding roads. As the sun descended, we found ourselves on a remote stretch of highway deep in the Tennessee mountains. The foliage displayed a vibrant tapestry of red, orange, and gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of autumn. As we continued our journey, I glanced at the fuel gauge, my heart sank. The needle was perilously close to E. Panic swept over me as I realized we were running out of gas in the middle of nowhere. We were miles away from the nearest gas station, and the winding mountain roads had left us with no cell phone signal to call for help. "Sally Ann, we're in trouble," I said, my voice tinged with anxiety. She looked at me with concern. "What do we do?" "We'll have to hope for a good Samaritan to come along," I replied, my fingers crossed. We decided to turn on the hazard lights and wait by the side of the road, hoping that someone would take pity on two stranded travelers. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the mountain road. Our situation grew increasingly dire, and my anxiety gnawed at my insides. Just when desperation was setting in, a miracle appeared on the horizon. Headlights pierced the darkness, growing steadily closer. A weathered pickup truck pulled up, and a middle-aged man with a friendly smile greeted us. He introduced himself as Clyde, a logger who lived nearby. He seemed like the epitome of southern hospitality, offering us a ride to the nearest gas station. With immense relief, we hopped into Clyde's truck. The cabin smelled of pine, and the worn leather seats bore the marks of a hard day's work. Sally Ann and I exchanged relieved glances, grateful for the kindness of a stranger. Clyde regaled us with the stories of life in the mountains, and the miles passed quickly as we chatted. However, as we ventured deeper into the mountains, a subtle shift occurred. The warmth in Clyde's voice gave way to an unsettling silence. The forest grew denser, and the road became more winding and treacherous. My unease grew as Clyde's demeanor changed, his friendly smile replaced by a steely expression. We passed a dilapidated sign that read, "No trespassing." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The conversation had ceased, and a heavy tension hung in the air. Sally Ann and I exchanged nervous glances, our instincts on high alert. Suddenly, Clyde turned sharply down an overgrown trail that led deeper into the woods. Panic surged through us as we realized that we were heading away from civilization, not toward it. "Hey, Clyde, where are you taking us?" I asked, my voice quaking. He spoke in cryptic, menacing tones, his eyes darting between us. Fear pulsed through our veins as he detailed his sinister intentions. He said of his past victims, the isolation of the mountains, and the gruesome trophies he had collected. The reality dawned on us. Clyde was no good Samaritan. We had fallen into the clutches of a cold-blooded predator. Sally Ann and I exchanged a glance that conveyed our shared terror and resolve. We needed to act, and we needed to act fast. As Clyde rambled on, I suddenly reached for a heavy toolbox on the truck's floor. My fingers wrapped around a wrench, a makeshift weapon that might be our only lifeline. With our hearts pounding and adrenaline coursing through our veins, we seized a fleeting moment of distraction. Sally Ann pretended to faint, slumping in her seat. Clyde's attention momentarily shifted to her, and it was the opening we had been waiting for. With all the strength I could muster, I swung the wrench toward Clyde's head. It connected with a resounding thud, causing him to cry out in pain. His grip on the steering wheel faltered, and the truck veered off course, crashing into a tree. The collision jolted all of us, and the night erupted with chaos as the truck stopped. I scrambled for the door handle and tumbled out into the darkness. Sally Ann followed suit, and together, we sprinted into the dense woods behind us. Clyde groaned, disoriented from the crash, but our determination to escape overcame our fear. Branches scratched at our arms and legs as we ran, the forest an impenetrable labyrinth of shadows. Every snap of a twig and every rustle of leaves sent shivers down our spines, but we couldn't afford to stop. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, we stumbled upon a small, seemingly abandoned cabin. We had no idea who lived there, but we had no other choice. Desperation fueled our actions as we banged on the door, hoping for refuge from our pursuer. To our immense relief, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman who had lived in the cabin for decades. We explained our harrowing ordeal, and she offered us protection and assistance, making sure we were safe from Clyde's clutches. Meanwhile, the sound of sirens grew closer. Law enforcement descended upon the forest, guided by our frantic call for help. Clyde was apprehended, his reign of terror coming to a bitter end. Our escape from the clutches of a predator was a nightmarish ordeal. Still, our resourcefulness, determination, and the unexpected help of a kind stranger had saved us from an unimaginable fate. The mountains of Tennessee, once a symbol of natural beauty, had become the backdrop for our terrifying escape and ultimate justice. In 2021, on a stormy summer night, I found myself on an isolated stretch of Highway 61 heading to Silver Bay, Wisconsin. The clock on my car's dashboard read 12:17 a.m. as I carefully drove the rain-soaked roads, desperately trying to reach my family's cabin not far from Silver Bay. The rain was unrelenting, falling in heavy sheets, obscuring my vision and making every mile treacherous. Adding to my anxiety, my fuel gauge was perilously close to empty, and I had no cell phone signal to call for help. After half an hour of exhausting driving, I spotted a weather-beaten road sign indicating a rest area ahead. Fatigue weighed heavily on me, and I longed for a break from the drive from Highland Park, Illinois. The cabin was still half an hour away, but the hope of a warm cup of coffee from a vending machine and a brief respite from the storm was enough to keep me going. Finally, the rest area came into view, an oasis of a dimly lit restroom, information kiosk, and vending area during the storm. Raindrops created a shimmering pathway to the entrance, dancing on the wet pavement. I parked my car out front. I was the only car in the parking area. With relief, I was grateful for a moment's respite from the relentless downpour. Inside the small rest area building, I was greeted by the pounding of rain on the metal roof. It was surprisingly noisy, but I was dry. I headed to the restroom, spotting a flickering sign above the vending area indicating that the coffee machine was operational. I hit the toilet and then I went to the vending room. The fluorescent light cast long shadows across the worn concrete floor. It felt abandoned and cold. I put in some coins and the machine poured coffee. I heard a shuffling noise behind me. I turned with my hot cup to find a hooded figure standing in the entry, his face concealed by a COVID-19 mask. The stranger's eyes were cold and dead, and an uneasy silence between us under the pounding rain of the roof. "Hey there, I didn't hear you come in," I stammered, attempting to break the silence. "I didn't expect to see anyone here. You gave me a fright. It's a hell of a night, isn't it?" The masked and hooded figure remained silent, staring at me, the atmosphere growing more tense with each passing second. I turned back to the coffee machine and hastily took some sugar and cream. When I turned around again, the stranger had vanished. I thought he had gone into the restroom. As I was about to exit the rest stop facility, the sound of an ominous switchblade opening behind me cut through the rain on the roof. I slowly turned to see the hooded figure brandishing a blade with a dangerous look in their eyes. "Give me your wallet," the hooded figure croaked, his voice a raspy whisper, the blade flickering in the dim light. I was panicked as I reached for my wallet and fumbled, accidentally dropping it onto the concrete floor. I hesitated to pick it up, apologizing and saying I had nothing in it. Just then, the rest facility's door opened, and a state police officer who had pulled off the night road from the storm to grab a cup of coffee entered. He immediately sized up the mugging and drew his sidearm. "Drop the knife!" the officer shouted, the tension in the room cut by lightning. The criminal hesitated briefly, then dropped the weapon and raised their hands in surrender. The police officer swiftly apprehended the would-be robber and called for backup. I watched, still trembling from the ordeal, realizing that I had narrowly escaped a terrifying situation. The police officer informed me that he had an alert for a fugitive responsible for a violent robbery 50 miles back several hours ago. It was just a coincidence the officer had walked into the rest stop at this moment. Relieved and grateful for the timely arrival of the police officer, I resumed my journey to the cabin. I am forever thankful to that officer. The rain had not relented, but the fear that gripped me began to wane as I continued through the storm. When I finally reached the cabin, a haven of warmth and light welcomed me. The scent of the wood-burning stove filled the air, and I felt a deep sense of relief. I had made it, and I was safe. In the following days, I relished the tranquility of the cabin, taking long walks in the woods and listening to the rain pattering on the roof. I couldn't help but reflect on that fateful night at the rest area and the stark realization of how close I had come to danger. One evening, several months later, there was a breaking news report on the television. The criminal who had confronted me at the rest area was on trial, facing multiple charges for his violent crimes. I watched as the verdict was delivered. It was a satisfying feeling, knowing that the dangerous criminal was off the streets and would no longer pose a threat to others. Memory of that scary night in the rest area haunts me every time I drive by. I have never stopped again.
Subscribe.